Previously on the Santiago Boys. While ITT and the CIA are caught red-handed over the dirty dealings in Chile, Nixon goes after the journalist who breaks that story. The US Senate smells something fishy and launches an inquiry. In the meantime, spying gets out of control with bugs, codes, and embassy break-ins. And the Chilean right-wingers do continue to stir up trouble, wanting Allende's government to collapse. Stafford Beer grows fond of Chile, while the Santiago Boys teach him that technology is geopolitics by other means. And so far, they're far from winning those geopolitical battles. Welcome back to the Santiago Boys. My name is Evgeny Morozov, and we have so much more for you in the episode that follows. They knew this day would come. The Santiago Boys have been bracing themselves for it for months, but nothing could prepare them for the chaos that erupts when track owners go on strike in a remote and poor region of Chile. It's supposed to be a minor protest, but it quickly turns into a national crisis, and this crisis now is threatening to topple Allende's government. Of course, all of it could have been avoided if only the Santiago Boys had their way a long time ago. Yes, long time ago when they dreamt of a different Chile, a Chile connected by trains, not trucks. Gabriel Rodriguez was one of them.
People working in that area, and especially engineers and technicians like myself, consider that a very progressive area, the area of the future, something like today working in informatics, things like that.
Imagine a Chile with trains. Trains that link every corner of the country, that make transportation faster and cheaper, that reduce the dependence on foreign oil and imports. That's what the Santiago Boys wanted for their country. They wanted to break free from the grip of truck owners who aligned with the right wing and who can paralyze the economy with a mere strike. They wanted to overcome the geopolitical barriers that make Chile pursue inferior technologies. They had a clear understanding of these barriers thanks to their knowledge of dependency theory, which, along with cybernetics, is one of their favorite subjects.
What happened is that Chile is crazy because we are a very long country, very narrow. It's stupid to have destroyed the whole train connection system. It was replaced by highway transportation. Why? Obviously because the money coming from the World Bank and especially the Inter-American Bank goes to highway transportation because that was the American industry. The trains came from Europe.
But it's too late to fret about this now. As the national strike gets underway and frustration with Allende's government boils over, the middle classes seize the chance to air their own grievances. This leads other professional groups to band together in solidarity, from architects to pharmacists and everyone else in between. Imagine you're a doctor in Chile in 1972. You have spent years studying and training to save lives. You've sworn an oath to do no harm. But now you're faced with a dilemma. Do you join a national strike against the president you despise? Or do you stay loyal to your patients who need you? That's what thousands of doctors had to decide during one of the most turbulent periods in Chilean history. And President Allende is not happy with the choice made by most of them. He calls them traitors and sends his own loyalists to replace them in the hospitals. But there is a deeper reason why the strike has captured the attention of so many professional associations. Chile's middle-class experts are simply exasperated with Allende's insistence that they prioritize their social obligations over professional success. The ideological roots of their opposition go way back to the occupation of the Catholic University in 1967. We covered it in one of our earlier episodes. As the Santiago Boys sought to politicize the university, they encountered opposition not only from the Chicago Boys in the economics department, but also from the so-called gremialistas, the die-hard conservatives in the law faculty. The gremialistas were dead set on shielding the university from the perceived contamination, that's the exact word they used, by leftist ideas. Gabriel Rodriguez explains.
Gremialismo is something that came from 200 years ago, the idea that the society is not organized by ideologies, but is organized by areas.
Gremios, by the way, is just a way of referring to professional associations.
So professions and all these kind of things, students, are different kind of groups that can develop kind of hierarchical democracy, not direct democracy.
And so the gremialistas have been battling it out with the Santiago boys, adamant that professional associations, like those of doctors or engineers, hold the power to decide on their own social responsibilities. Perhaps they want none of them, and that's also fine. They are not to be imposed by government fiat or student pressure. The career decisions made by Allende, Che Guevara, and Fidel Castro do not bind anyone else, and they shouldn't. If doctors prefer lucrative private practice to working with the needy in poor settlements, more power to them. Well, that's at least what the gremialistas believe in. As the strike heats up, Stafford Beer finds himself in the midst of action in Santiago, and he's somewhat taken aback by what he discovers about these gremios. They are not the run-of-the-mill trade unions that he's been expecting. I managed to obtain an old and creaky tape of Stafford as he was dictating his recollections of that strike. My apologies for the quality.
The Gremista, far from being unionists reported in the Western press, were baby capitalists insistent on a protectionist line.
There is something almost sci-fi about how these gremialistas work. Like they somehow cracked the code of Stafford cybernetics and used it to their own advantage. We don't really think that that's what happened, but it's a fascinating thought. So, the strike does have a brain of its own, it seems. It's not just a bunch of truck drivers blocking the roads. These gremios have a network, and it's this network that supports them. And above all of them, there is the so-called Comando Gremial, the super gremio of sorts. It's the gremio that stands behind all this chaos, the real brain of the strike. And the leaders of this super brain are based in a posh house in Santiago, where they've rigged up a simple but effective control room of their own. They don't care about ergonomic chairs or flashy screens. No, they only care about bringing down Allende and his socialist dream. And they are determined to make that happen. As the strike rages on, the militants of Patria y Libertad are unleashing chaos with their violent sabotage of the nation's infrastructure. They have a secret weapon, something called Miguelitos. These are clusters of nails twisted together. They are scattered on the roads with just one intention: stop absolutely anyone who is brave enough to defy the order to stop driving. But there is a twist. The Miguelitos were originally used by left-wing radicals from MIR. Yes, the ones we got to know before. And their leader, Miguel Enriquez, may have even given them their name, Miguelitos. And now, with MIR supporting Allende, the Miguelitos have become the weapon of choice for Allende's enemies. But who is behind the strike? Here, opinions diverge. On the one hand, it's true that truck drivers, shopkeepers, and other similar middle-class elements have not received much love from Allende's coalition. At least this is what the Chilean journalist Alfredo Sepulveda, the author of a book on popular unity, believes.
Even though they were workers, they didn't really share the values of collectivity of the popular unity. They were, small businessmen, basically, the truck drivers. And they joined forces with the owners of small shops.
They don't fit neatly into the Marxist framework central to Allende's coalition.
They represent a part of the working world that was very adversarial with the popular unity because they didn't share the idea of collectivism, centralized economy, and so on and so forth.
But is that all that there is to the strike? Even American officials are skeptical, unable to shake off the feeling that the protest is not just about transportation. Here's what one puzzled State Department official notes at the time.
The manner in which the situation has evolved suggests that there was some pre-planning and an orchestration of support by elements not immediately concerned with the transportation industry, primarily business and professional groups.
From their vantage point in the government offices, the Santiago boys are also seeing some troubling signs. Gabriel Rodriguez, who's overseeing transportation planning for the government, is watching the situation very closely. He suspects a three-letter agency might be behind all of this.
The big entrepreneurs in the area of trucking, they had, through the political parties of the right, the connection with the CIA. And they received the money there.
But proving CIA's direct involvement is no easy feat. And even the Senate report that we've been consulting throughout this podcast is rather ambiguous on this matter.
It is clear that anti-government strikers were actively supported by several of the private sector groups which received CIA funds. There were extensive links between these private sector organizations and the groups which coordinated and implemented the strikes.
Peter Kornblue says that the question of the CIA's involvement still remains something of a mystery.
Whether the CIA directly funded that strike has been left up in the air. There aren't any really documents that say that they did, or if there are, those parts remain blacked out, redacted.
Even now, 50 years later, many of these documents remain shrouded in secrecy and classified. Just days before the strike, Fernando Flores secures a promotion, moving from his role at Corfo to become number 2 at the Ministry of the Economy. His reputation as an innovator precedes him.
I was never considered a tough political guy. I was more this eccentric guy in a certain sense.
And it's the cybernetic eccentricities that put him on the president's radar.
The thing that I never expected is that the velocity of my office to deal began to make us famous. And this is the way that Allende discovered me.
Gabriel Rodriguez recalls that even Fernando's jacket served a management purpose, apparently part of an elaborate information management system. This jacket is so smart, it could probably run the entire economy on its own.
This jacket with the two lateral pockets, he used to have blank cards. In one, those cards were written what need to be done, what's pending after a conversation with someone or a meeting.
So when the strike breaks out, Fernando goes to warn the president of what might be behind it.
And I went to visit Allende to introduce myself, and I said to President, I have an opinion if you can allow me to give you. This is not a truck driver issue. This is the first attempt to give you a coup d'etat.
With his experience in the transportation sector, Fernando is acutely aware of the potential ramifications of the strike.
It's very easy to isolate this country, to put 2 bombs in some territory, and you are going to have problem of food, problem of medicine, in particular for the north.
Allende heeds Fernando's warning and extends an invitation to present at the presidential palace. The stakes are high as Fernando has the chance to leave a lasting impression on the political leaders in attendance. However, his ideas are met with little enthusiasm.
I said what I said, and the people listen me like they listen a kid, okay?
But Allende gets it, putting Fernando in charge of managing the crisis itself. Fernando's only condition? He needs his office right there in the presidential palace. And with that, cybernetic thinking enters the very heart of the Chilean government. Fernando's new job is turning out to be a nightmare, though. The strikers have parked their trucks in the countryside, armed to the teeth, with anti-Allende forces providing backup. And they're not budging. Allende's response? He takes no chances, throwing the leaders of the gremios behind bars to quell this unrest. But is this enough? Well, probably not. But what more can he do? As a true Democrat, can Allende really justify clamping down on dissent?
Chile era un país abierto. Podía entrar cualquiera.
According to John Garces, political advisor to Allende, the ease with which anyone could enter the country made it vulnerable to destabilization. And Allende will keep it this way, the Democrat that he is. His only tough measure is to crack down on anti-government radio stations that are stoking the fires of the strike. Despite the crackdown, one of the radio stations persists, and it's the most poisonous of them all. The strange thing is that it only broadcasts for a few hours a day from a moving car. And guess who's behind the wheel, though? Mike Townley, the American mechanic that we previously encountered, the one with ties to the right-wing group Patria y Libertad, the guy who played a role in intercepting Allende's communications. They've heard quite a bit about him already. By then, he's taking his technical game to a new level, as a report from an American diplomat suggests.
Mike claims to have invented a form of Molotov cocktail that was eventually adopted by the Mir. The key ingredient is sawdust, which would stick to most surfaces and continue burning long after the gasoline has burned off.
As the strike rages on, Townley's once peaceful home becomes something of a hub of fear and destruction, a true terror factory churning out Molotov cocktails like loaves of bread. And with each passing moment, Townley's journey towards becoming one of Chile's most infamous terrorists gains momentum. So while the terrorists of Patria y Libertad are focused on violence, something else is happening in La Moneda, the presidential palace. There, Fernando and his team are quietly working on a cybernetic system to outsmart their opponents.
My principal role was to have something that allowed me to see how the priorities are changing, what are the emergencies that are happening, and how I need to manage the finite resources to do, and more important, the coordination, because it was the coordination very difficult to do it.
Fernando is off to a great start.
They gave me a big office. We took some ministry office out, and we changed him, and I installed there because I need to have a lot of possibility to have framework and control and paper and strip, and have people putting data by shifting during the day.
One of Fernando's principal advisors is an Italian fellow called Mario Grandi, another foreign addition to the team of the Santiago Boys.
Sono stato dentro La Moneda per 27 giorni.
Fernando and Mario spent long days and nights inside the palace. Mario says he spent 27 consecutive days inside, sleeping at his office at the nearby Ministry of the Economy. Fernando matches his colleagues' work ethic.
I also slept many nights in this place. That was a room in the palace.
Mario and Fernando's path first crossed when Mario was teaching economics at the Catholic University. Yes, in the same department where the famous Chicago Boys were spreading the gospel of free markets. But Mario actually brushes off the advances of the Chicago Boys, and instead he follows Fernando to the government. So this explains how he gets to work with Stafford Beer on creating and fine-tuning a model of the Chilean economy. He's not wasting his time reading Milton Friedman. He's actually working on the very cutting edge of management cybernetics. So this explains, perhaps, why Mario and Fernando's effective handling of the strike owe so much to Stafford's cybernetic insights. They use them, in fact, to subdivide the country and establish a clear chain of command.
Quindi io feci il disegno dell'organizzazione.
Stafford's influence on them is evident in the esoteric references to cybernetic concepts like recursivity and variety that have become part of their vocabulary. And Mario name drops them throughout this conversation.
Avevamo molto chiaro che cosa era la varietà, che cosa era la ricorsività, che cosa era un amplificatore, che cosa era un filtro.
So here are all these strange concepts: variety, recursion, amplification, filters. The enemies might be busy putting nails on the roads, but these nerds are fighting such sabotage with cybernetic concepts. But just when things seem to be going smoothly, another unexpected twist occurs.
Then, in some of the day, I forget exactly when the people tell me the president is sick. He's sleeping here in the palace, not in his house anymore. And he said that he wants to see you. And then I enter to a room, and he is there in bed.
Yes, it's true. Salvador Allende is in bed, incapacitated. And it's happening during the most important crisis of his presidency, a prostate problem. The tube attached to his intimate parts prevents him from moving around, and a heart complication only adds to his misery. But even weakened, Allende still remains in the cybernetic globe.
Then every day in the morning, I went to his bed, and I told him what is happening. There are so many things here, the supply have been taken here, there, It's not the discipline of politicians think that way.
And then something surprising happens. Allende's enemy, one of the strike leaders, has a heart attack. And Allende does something incredibly generous. He gets the Air Force to fly in a pacemaker from Belgium to save the fellow's life. He doesn't know that this act of compassion will never be reciprocated by his enemies. Quite the opposite, in fact. How do you handle a crisis like this? Allende's supporters are divided. Some think they need to fix things from the top, like Fernando. Others think they need to fix things from the bottom and rely on grassroots support, not technocrats. It's a struggle between two kinds of power, the power of the experts and the power of the people. And it's a struggle that has constantly reoccurred throughout Allende's presidency. There is much to be said in favor of the bottom-up option. Ordinary people are doing extraordinary things to resist the strike and support Allende. The bottom-up efforts to overcome the strike are admirable. Leftist students packing trucks to the brim with crucial supplies, pro-Allende drivers risking their life and limb, steering around Miguelitos that dot their path. All of that is happening. But Allende's enemies are not giving up so easily. The bosses of the private sector want to stop production altogether. They want to kill Allende's dream. But the workers won't let them. They keep working, they keep fighting, and they're not alone. Joshua Friis-Trink, the historian who studied that period, has this to say.
In the face of that work stoppage, this counter-revolutionary strike, community groups, factory workers, women begin to adapt new strategies to both produce essential food goods and to then distribute those food goods throughout the country.
This conflict has a controversial soundtrack, a truly divided one. On one side, silence. The strikers who want to overthrow Allende have called for a day of silence. On the other side, noise. The construction workers who support him are blasting their air hammers in defiance. And in between these extremes, something else is happening. Something surprising and hopeful. Workers from different industries are joining forces to help each other out. They're fixing trucks, they're carrying vegetables, they're distributing food. A new kind of organization is born out of this amazing teamwork. They call it cordones industriales, industrial belts. They are groups of workers and neighbors who work together to get essential goods, like food, to people who need them. There's hardly been a better way to advertise people's power. Perhaps the truck owners even ought to be thanked for unleashing all this creative energy from the bottom up. But the strike is still far from over, and the technocrats aren't giving up either. For now, Fernando is creating his own makeshift war room inside La Moneda.
And I know that what I need to do there is to put a center that allow me to anticipate action, be responsive very fast, and also avoid political problems. And also to filter for Allende all bullshit that arrives, infinite people that want to speak with him about something that he cannot do anything with.
Allende is not exactly Harvard Business School material.
Yeah, I believe for management and this kind of thing, he was a disaster. He don't have any experience. That's why I was a complimentary guy in some moment.
His approach seems to be working.
He was no disciplined guy. Then we put some discipline to the story.
When you think of a war room, you might picture a high-tech, ultra-modern space. But the one in La Moneda is anything but, as Mario Grandi points out.
Per esempio, arrivava la informazione che c'erano a disposizione un certo numero di camion.
With just some basic information, like, for example, how many trucks are available for transporting goods from one point to another, they're able to anticipate what factories need to be shut down and what supplies are in short demand. Who knew that pens, paper, and tape could be so powerful? Stafford Beer is delighted to see his ideas put to effective use. Here's what Stafford put on that tape that he dictated.
The experience changed all their perceptions. Information suddenly became a national resource.
What would happen to this national resource without the telex network? Gabriel Rodriguez points out that the strike revealed the utility of the telex machines to the government.
Some moment when things get more political because of the strike, telex were installed in certain places of the Ministerio de Economía and the Ministerio de Hacienda and the offices of the ministers, and La Moneda finally.
Gabriel has become something of a telex professional himself.
For example, I send messages to the telex. My secretary learned how to use that and then send what the number of trucks we have already in disposition to assign, things like that.
At Core 4, other Santiago boys are at work on similar tasks.
There were flows of information coming from the plants, and some of these were saying we don't have trucks to transmit the product.
This is Raúl Espejo, who spends the strike in the Corfo building.
We had a group of people staying 24 hours to connect the data coming from the different parts of the industry to the requirements that were expressed by companies around the country.
Over at the CIA, the analysts are taking note, as one of the internal memos reveals.
The most likely outcome in the current crisis was that a coup would not develop within the next few days.
The CIA may have underestimated the power of a few guys armed with just pens, paper, and telex machines. As the agency concludes, no course of action could remove Allende from power, at least not now.
The country would have to suffer a little more under Allende before the kind of consensus which would provoke the military into deciding on a coup would be reached among the main elements of the opposition. That is, the military, the political parties, and the private sector.
And then, suddenly, someone at the CIA has a bright but devious idea. To convince the Chilean military that a coup is feasible and that it won't trigger a violent far-left insurgency, the CIA could share its database, the database of dangerous leftists, including all those mere people, with the Chilean military. After the coup, the military could use this data to, and that's a quote from the CIA, roll up these elements as quickly and thoroughly as possible. After all, what's the harm in sharing a few names and addresses with a foreign military? It's not like anything bad could happen, right? The Santiago boys are unaware of these machinations, of course. Gabriel Rodriguez admits that they were quite unprepared for the extent of all the deception and planning around them.
We are very naive. If you look now and you listen to the recordings of Kissinger with Nixon, etc., you say, these things were happening. They were talking about this. They were giving instructions about this. And we are not aware of that.
So the strike fails to unseat Allende, just as the CIA was predicting. Instead, the military actually joins his cabinet. And the move to appoint General Carlos Prats, the head of the Chilean armed forces, as Allende's left hand, causes a huge rift among his opponents and his supporters alike. As Alfredo Sepulveda, the Chilean journalist and expert on popular unity, explains, Prats is not exactly a revolutionary presence in this government.
He gets the most important position in Allende's cabinet, the Ministry of Interior. And obviously, Prats is a moderate, and Allende has to juggle with this internal strife between radicalized politicians and more moderate politicians, so to speak. They all consider themselves revolutionaries.
But at least he likes the Santiago boys.
Il generale Prats lo stimava molto.
Mario Grande shares that Prats admired Fernando and his cybernetic squadron. This might explain why Allende selects Flores, yes, Fernando Flores, as the next economy minister. It's quite a promotion. After all, just months earlier, Fernando was dealing with managing companies and overseeing Stafford's cybernetic escapades.
Because what do you think? I am not an economist. Say, who cares? He said. No one study for this kind of thing.
Fernando may be a digital revolutionary, even a disruptor, as we would say today. But he's hardly the most radical leftist inside Allende's entourage. He's actually more on the moderate side. And with the military joining the government, he might just be the guy to placate them. Alfredo Sepulveda explains the context of that decision.
Allende basically is trying to make more room for the military to feel more comfortable in a cabinet of a Marxist government. A Latin American army officer in the 1970s wouldn't feel very comfortable with a Marxist surrounded by Marxists.
But now, with the economy collapsing, can Fernando's cybernetic expertise save the day? Or will he fail, and spectacularly so? Chile's right-wingers are still reeling from the failure of the strike, but there is something else going on behind the scenes, right here in Santiago. A secret meeting of leftist radicals from across South America. They call themselves the Council of Revolutionary Coordination, or GCR, the acronym of its Spanish name. And they have a plan to overthrow the status quo by any means necessary. This group is not just talk. They actively train militants across borders, and they publish Political Theory magazine. In a way, they pursue the same agenda that the leftist radicals of MIR had advanced even before Allende's victory. And needless to say, MIR does play an important role in this new JCR body, that network of leftists across borders.
In fact, the JCR was a coordinating body that brought together 4 of the main armed groups in South America at the time.
This is Francesca Lessa, an Italian academic at Oxford who's been studying government repression all across Latin America.
These activists had sort of been in contact with each other as part of their exile, in many cases, in Santiago, in Chile, in the early 1970s.
Beatriz Allende, with her military training back in Cuba, is closely following all these gatherings. She's also trying to help any way she can. And there are others inside the Allende government who feel sympathetic towards them. Some even using the photocopiers inside their offices to make copies of their guerrilla manuals. Allende's peaceful road to socialism is of course very appealing, but sometimes it's wise to hedge one's bets. The Santiago boys, the right-wing gremios, the far-left guerrillas, it seems like they are all on the same quest for cybernetic enchantment. The destinations may be different, and of course they are, but they all want to travel down the same road to reach them. It's all about technology, synergy, coordination. But which one of them will emerge victorious? As was to be expected, the strike rekindles an old debate inside the coalition. Who is to lead this revolution? Should it be the masses or the professionals? Joshua Franz Strink knows that this becomes a central tension of the period.
How much democracy, how much people power, in the sort of English translation of a key term of the Popular Unity Revolution, poder popular, how much democracy is necessary to break the sort of stranglehold that domestic economic monopolies and foreign capital had over Chile's economy.
Now that the strike is over, what will become of all these bottom-up activities that defended Allende? Will they simply fizzle away?
Starting after the October strike, the revolutionary left movement in Chile, known as the MIR, as well as certain tendencies within the Catholic progressive left, begin to form their own neighborhood price and supply committees, what were known as the COP, the Committees for Popular Supply.
But what starts as a practical solution to food shortages soon becomes a powerful instrument.
They begin to determine the essential consumer needs of people who live in particular neighborhoods, and they begin to hand out cards or sort of membership cards that determine how much each family is able to consume in a moment in which certain essential foodstuffs are in very short supply.
Until the strike, the technocrats in charge have been steering this ship, confidently managing activities like consumption and distribution. But then, in a flash, everything changes, and they lose control over those 2 key areas. People's power steps in. In a way, it's similar to how they lost control over production after those unplanned worker takeovers at the very start of Allende's presidency. Remember all those factories making caramels and whatnot being overtaken by workers? Something like this is happening now, but in the areas of consumption and distribution. So with the strike over and Allende's socialist revolution in chaos, all eyes are now on Fernando Flores, the new economy minister. Will he manage to step in and rescue the country, perhaps by using cybernetics or computers or his magic jacket? Will he step up to the proverbial plate of those tasty empanadas and clean up the mess? Will he rise to the occasion? And will he find the help that he needs? Where? Well, one person is definitely eager to help. Stafford is thrilled when he learns about Fernando's appointment, and he wastes no time sending a telex to Santiago. He's brimming with enthusiasm, declaring that reports all very cheering. Nothing must hold us up now. Fernando needs the whole thing fast. But should he relocate to Chile full-time, as his colleagues have been insisting? Well, it's a tough choice for Stafford. On one hand, he has family in England. They need him. His son is hooked on drugs, and his daughter Vanilla is also in a bad relationship. Vanilla says she didn't fully grasp Stafford's dilemma at the time.
I assumed I was significant, but we wrote to each other and talked a lot when we could. And he was always extraordinarily kind and helpful for me, and was concerned for the other brother who had many addiction problems.
On the other hand, Stafford has this cyber thing going on in Chile. It's a dream come true for him, a chance to make history. So he sends a letter to Santiago expressing his uncertainty and emotions. It's a remarkable letter, and it just sheds so much light on what must have been going on through his head. As he points out, his most daunting obstacle is his wife, Sally. She hates Allende, and she won't move to Chile with him. Here's how Stafford puts it in that letter, with an actor reading out his lines.
She doesn't agree with the regime, and she believes that I am wrong to work for it. One, because it is unscrupulous, or will fail, or will cast one aside without warning, or even will have me jailed or shot. Two, because it stops me from building a nice, respectable consulting practice. Three, because a lot of people, ranging from family and friends to prospective clients, regard UP with disapproval and will write me off as an advisor, whereupon we shall all starve. 4, because my experiences in Chile have changed me as a man, they have, in a way she detests.
He knows that Sally's right about that. He's a different man now.
I feel liberated as a person. For the first time in my life, I have real friends. For the first time in my professional career, I am not staggering under the weight of frustration and bitterness. My whole range of thinking is expanding fast. I am sick of England and sick of my lifestyle. I would like to start again. Sally can recognize a lot of this. She resents it, and it frightens her.
After much hesitation, Stafford makes a painful decision. He won't be moving to Santiago. Instead, he'll keep flying there from London, a very odd and tiring commute. And this decision has a price. He needs to ask his friends in Chile for a year's salary in advance. He is not at all sure just how long Allende will be there. Is he asking too much of a country that's already struggling economically? So Stafford has been jetting to Chile for almost a year now. He comes to help Allende build a system that could run the economy, a system called CyberSyn. But then something happens. Yes, a strike, a massive strike that paralyzes the country for weeks. And Stafford sees something amazing. He sees how people's power, and not just the technocrats' power, helps Allende survive the strike and keep his socialist dream alive. How more powerful would these people be if only they had cybernetic software? So he sees a new possibility for CyberSyn. It's not just a tool for managing factories anymore. It can become a tool for empowering people. He writes about it in an essay, which is full of hope and excitement. He says, Fernando is now the minister. That has to change everything. And he really tries to act as if it does. Raúl Espejo remembers Stafford turning in this new, more political direction.
At that point, he started to realize that really the problem was not the industry. Really the problem was not Corfu. Really the problem was the total economy. He goes out of strictly industry and goes into societal issues.
Stafford is effusive in his praise of all the bottom-up organizing that has emerged during the strike. He sees it as a valuable model that CyberSyn should perhaps follow.
There were these bottom-up interactions with the industrial belts, and the relevance of this bottom-up led Stafford to change his mind.
In a bold move, Stafford also breaks with convention. He speaks out about the pitfalls of government bureaucracy. And all of that despite the fact that it's Corfu bureaucrats who are paying his bills. Here's what he advises Fernando in that post-strike memo.
Don't make lists of essential goods in the ministry. That's bureaucracy. Ask the people to tell the minister what they want, what their allocation is, and what they have of any commodity they are concerned about.
In a stunning act of rebellion, Stafford Beer confronts Corfu's technocratic leaders and puts the needs of workers front and center.
Who is supposed to be running industry? The workers. It has been very difficult to make the mental adjustments and to reach proper conclusions, but we seem to have done it. A new post should be created by Corfu, which I think of as Director of Total Industry. It is vividly clear that he should be a worker.
But not everyone is so enthusiastic. The CyberSyn team is experiencing a crisis of confidence, with mounting doubts and uncertainties about the project and their own ability to achieve its goals. The real challenge, as Raúl Espejo explains, lies in the conspicuous lack of enthusiasm from Corfu itself.
I think in general they felt that this was one of the crazy ideas of Fernando.
At best, they've tolerated it.
No one, to my knowledge, was thinking seriously that this approach to cybernetics was going to be of significant value to the planning of the economy of the country.
This lack of support is taking a toll on the team. 1 year into CyberSyn, Raúl is in despair. Today, he writes to Stafford weeks after the strike, there is not one executive from Corfu that actually understands the concepts and the systems developed during this last year of work. So, as the project takes a more political turn, questions start emerging about its purpose and ideology. Does it support Allende? Is it a scientific endeavor? Is it a political one? No one seems to know.
Throughout the project, there were people who were interested in the project for theoretical reasons, and others were more concerned and interested in the practical aspects of the project, and that was the dichotomy that we had.
Everything was so much easier before the strike. But now that it's been dealt with, the country is different, the project is different, and the kind of support they enjoy is different as well. The most important cheerleader is now busy with other things.
Now, the problem is that we were running this project based on the goodwill and the friendship of many people. And suddenly, Fernando, who was giving all the institutional backing to this stuff, disappears. And then we have to pay bills.
How does it feel to embark on something so ambitious and so utopian, only to see your sponsor promoted to a job from hell. While Stafford is full of all those hopes that Fernando's promotion would give the project an extra edge and so forth, others on the team know that it might as well mean that the project is now over. Gabriel Rodriguez explains.
Raul was not a powerful person in the sense of political power, and Fernando was that guy. So when things change, I understand why he got so lost. Because the relation with Fernando was absolutely central in order to be sure about what he was doing.
Fernando, however, doesn't think it's all his fault.
And I believe some of the people have abandoned them. But I believe it had nothing to do with reality that happened. I don't control my political life. Clear? If the president tells you that you're going to be you and the Minister of Economics, how you do?
As Fernando transitions away from Cybersyn, Stafford's apprehension about moving to Chile full-time proved justified. Fernando simply has no time for cybernetic software.
Every trip that Stafford came to Chile, I spent a few hours with him. I didn't have time to do that.
Meanwhile, Fernando's rapid rise to the top has caused those around him to reflect on some of his rougher edges. His is a very complicated personality. And the fact that he often moves at double the speed of everyone else can in fact be quite annoying. Every now and then, his ego also gets in the way.
I mean, power is essential for Fernando. I mean, he will go after power at almost any cost.
Enrique Farné, from the Ministry of the Economy, has been keeping a close eye on Cybersyn. And recently, he's becoming increasingly perplexed by Fernando's messianic turn. Here, once again, the tension between people and technocrats, citizens and experts, is quite visible. Only that, in Fernando's case, he fashions himself a technocrat who actually wants to help the people.
I remember arguing with him around the table because he's bigger than me. He can, I mean, if we fight, he'll win. I mean, fight with fists. Talking about different type of things. He came with something like, I want power, but I want power to give it away, to give it to the people. And then I said, Fernando, you tell me if anyone has ever done that. Nobody. I mean, people want power to keep it. And then he says, no. So I said, well, give me one example. I said, Jesus.
Yes, Jesus. That's the role model here. El Negro Flores, just a humble man from Talca. The strike may be over, but Allende's troubles are definitely not. Has he pushed too far, too fast? Is it too late to save his vision of a better Chile? As Allende surveys the wreckage, he's starting to realize that his enemies will stop at nothing to see him ousted from power. Tanya Harmer, the LSE historian, explains.
Allende was very sure that if a coup happened, he would defend it and make the ultimate sacrifice, defend it to the last kind of consequences. But he wanted to begin putting in place provisions for his family if that were to happen.
Amidst the looming threat of a coup, Allende seeks out Luis, his son-in-law and trusted intelligence officer working at the Cuban embassy in Santiago.
Allende called Luis to his office privately and confidentially and started making plans personally for what might happen in the event of a coup and in the event of his death.
Allende is especially concerned about Beatrice's safety, urging her to flee together with Luis and their daughter and go to Cuba.
He was deeply worried about what Beatrice might do in the event of a coup. He knew that with her military training and her commitment, her political sense of commitment to be consecuente, something very important at the time, that she would want to fight alongside him, and he wanted to avoid this happening.
Allende begins to make plans for the worst-case scenario.
And he also asked Luis if he could give Luis at the Cuban embassy his private archives. So start to give him sensitive private documents that he wanted to ensure were safe and secure in the event that there was a coup and his presidential home or Tomas Moro or La Moneda was raided.
Allende's instructions to Luis are clear and direct. Allende understands that his private papers could be used against him, and he commands that they be burned in the event of a coup. His fears are well-founded. Even the heavily guarded Cuban embassy is now covered in ominous graffiti.
In 1972, on the streets of Santiago, a terror campaign emerges.
This is author Vincent Bevins, who has studied military coups throughout the Cold War era.
So it's not the only one that takes place under Allende, but it's one of the most frightening. And it consists of graffitiing the word Jakarta, or Jakarta is coming, on the walls of the city, or sending postcards to leftists, employees of the Allende administration, allies of the left in the country, delivering the message, Jakarta is coming.
Why even mention Jakarta, the capital of a country that lies so far away, in the graffiti that scrawled across Santiago in Chile? Well, that's actually a very explicit warning about what is to come.
And for anybody that's been paying attention to the Cold War, at that time, the message is very clear. What they're saying with these postcards, with this graffiti is, we're going to kill you, just like the Indonesians killed their communists.
The reference to Jakarta is a note to a brutal mass murder that took place in Indonesia just 7 years earlier. It brought a new right-wing dictator to power who then installed US-trained economists, known as the Berkeley Mafia, to shape the country's economy. In fact, these Berkeley Mafia economists set the stage for the rise of the Chicago Boys. Those are truly standing on the shoulders of giants. As Vincent Bevins notes, the mass murder in Indonesia was noticed all around the globe.
The intentional mass murder of approximately 1 million innocent people in 1965 in Indonesia, the destruction of the largest communist party outside of the Soviet Union and China, and perhaps the largest democratic socialist movement in human history, was seen as everybody that was paying attention in the Cold War as a very big deal.
And for Chilean leftists who know their Cold War history, its message is clear. It's a warning of the agony and torment that can appear on the horizon any time now. The Santiago Boys still believe in the power of cybernetics, of course. But as the threat of violence looms larger, doubts begin to surface about the power of democratic politics. Can the analytical minds truly match the lethal weapons of the enemies? Isn't it time to trade in their keyboards for machine guns? In the next episode of the Santiago Boys, Chile gets even closer to the brink of chaos. Unexpectedly, even CyberSyn, the ambitious project to create a cybernetic utopia, faces fierce opposition. And surprisingly, it comes from all sides, including from Stafford Beer's native Britain. Some there even see it as a dictatorship in disguise. Worse, there are others who doubt its very existence. Will the Santiago Boys cope with the mounting pressure? Will they be able to defend their vision of a better society? All of this and more in our next episode. Stay tuned. The Santiago Boys is a co-production of Cora Media and Post Utopia. Writing, research, development, and presentation, Evgeny Morozov. Music main theme, Luca Michele. Audio editing and post-production, Mattia Licciotti. Music supervisor, Luca Michele. Post-production assistant, Lucrezia Marcelli. Post-production producer, Matteo Salsa. People who've been helping me with organizing, recording, and processing hundreds of interviews are unfortunately too many to name here. But I would like to extend special thanks to Chiara De Leone, Ekais Cancella, Nikolai Maximchuk, and Matteo Miavaldi, all of whom helped me in more than one way. Full credits are also available on the podcast website, the-santiago-boys.com.